together. It's not enough to have a good one and a bad one. The bottom line is all of them have to be good, and the only way they can do that if they collaborate.
Because ultimately it is about creating, as you're highlighting, an enabling environment for business. I want to move on now to what you may have noticed as far as emerging trends are concerned, or metals that investors should be paying attention to in Africa's mining landscape. Any?
Yeah. So I think for metals, I'll single out a few. Obviously, there are those that have been classified as critical minerals as a result of them being critical to most African countries. So for those ones, you're looking at the likes of nickel. In Madagascar, at the moment, the industry is having a downturn as a result of Indonesia's overcapacity. And down the line, the industry should turn a curve. Similar for platinum as well, where demand was weakened post-COVID, and that also affected the industry. And we're looking forward to the next few quarters, there being a rebound in terms of pricing. Beyond just singling out metals, I think what is also important to highlight is the conversation around downstream across Africa. Governments, whether it's nickel, whether it's lithium, whether it's cobalt, every government is looking at how can I add value to these minerals in order to increase the revenue or in order to increase the impact of these resources on its people. So I think beyond just singling out platinum and nickel and lithium as commodities that should be on the horizon, we believe that going downstream would also be an important conversation in Mining Indaba 2026.
And lastly, what are you looking forward to as far as the mining Indaba is concerned, apart from what you've already highlighted now?
I think my highlight for Indaba has always been bringing these communities. And we've got this very fascinating program we did last year where we sort of organized a competition for people in various communities to share with us what our theme means for them. And this year, our theme revolves around partnerships, strength through partnerships. And we're going to do a similar competition where people tell us, what does this theme mean to you? And those who ultimately come out as winners are then able to get supported through sponsorship to come to Mining Indaba. And for me, I always look forward to reading those submissions because it's one thing coming up with a theme. It's also another thing when people personalize it and make it their story, own it and bring it to life. And so if you ask what I'm looking forward to, it's about those submissions coming in and getting to see what our theme means for people.
Well, that should be very interesting, and hopefully you'll get some quirky ones as well that are so out of the box that you've just got to give them, that access. Kwasi, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you as well. Bye.
Thank you. That's Kwasi Ampofo. He's head of metals and mining at Bloomberg NEF, taking us to 21 minutes after 4 p.m.
9 to 12 midday Central African Time.
On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatami.
Should influencers be expected to be impactful in society? If there is a social or societal conversation that goes up, should we be waiting eagerly to hear what the influencers have to say?
They are more than just entertainers. They are thought leaders to some certain degree. They influence culture, they influence people's thought processes, they set trends, they shape opinions of people. And the sad reality is, although a lot of them don't want to accept it, I think we're getting better with them realizing that embarking in that journey and in that space comes with a certain level of responsibility.
I see it differently in that, professionals are already good at their job, but there is an optionality that they might have to use the position that they hold in society to be able to deliver a message. This year you made the example of actors and actresses. So the same could apply to a sportsman. Just because someone's good at soccer doesn't mean that they have to have an influence over society from a specific standpoint.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
We head over to Nigeria now, where the government has banned the export of raw shea nuts to help the country become a global supplier of refined shea butter and other skincare ingredients. Now, the ban will be in place for 6 months, after which it will be reviewed. The country's Vice President, Kashim Shettima, says the decision is not an anti-trade policy, but, I quote, a pro-value addition policy designed to secure raw materials for our processing factories and also push Nigeria's earnings from the fruit of the shea nut trees that grow from 65 million to 300 million US dollars annually. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Dennis O'Shea, a certified financial modeling and valuation analyst, geopolitics content curator as well. Dennis, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Thami, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on the program.
I couldn't help but make the connection between us talking about, raw shea nuts and you being Dennis O'Shea. And I mean, one just cannot miss that. One cannot miss that.
They should make me the brand ambassador.
Well, who knows? Maybe it's part of your family legacy. You from the shea family, and the shea nuts are named after your lineage. So there you have it. But perhaps let's start here. What do you read, from this decision that has been made? Is it industrialization? Is it protectionists? What are your views?
Those both industrialization and protectionism, that just economic definitions that were coined together by the West. But the reality is that we just have to protect ourselves. And that's what everybody's doing. At the moment, the United States is championing it. China too is doing theirs also, though they are doing theirs with overproduction and pushing all their products to the rest of the world. So what do we now do in Africa? We consume everything. I think it's a combination of both protectionism and industrialization, because if we don't protect our local industries, we'll not be able to industrialize and even stand par to par with some of the big powers in West Africa. So anybody can call it anything that they want to call it. That's economics in the room. But when it comes to the labor market and reality, we need to push our industrialization. And that's my answer to that.
And what could have prompted this move? Because for decades now, the continent has been talking about being able to produce, finished goods and exporting those finished goods instead of raw material. And now we're seeing it happen. What prompted this move in Nigeria?
So if you look at it on a local basis, Nigeria seems to be a mini China that has a domestic market that can foster the economy beyond just waiting for foreign exchanges, beyond just waiting for foreign markets and stuff, just locally. And we can see examples of India, we can see examples of China. They are taking advantage of the local economies, penetrating them, making them more systemized, making them more industrialized, so as to be able to boost domestic industrialization and domestic growth that international trade and international business interactions with other countries can now build on. If you don't have a foundation, you cannot build a building, no matter how small or how big that building is. So that is what is forming this right now. And a lot of African nations are waking up to the reality that, hey, listen here, these nations are leaving us behind. The Asian tigers are leaving us behind. The European nations have left us behind. Look at China and the Philippines and the Singapores. They're doing super well. So what is it that they have that we don't have? Africa has 60% of arable land. That is what we have. Do you understand how much money that can be if we turn it into agricultural power? We will be feeding the entire world and have so much to spoil. So many African nations are just touching. This is just a bit of a start. When they start full force, the entire world will feel the prowess of African nations and the amount of land we have. Very good soils that can be turned into big financial powerhouses in different African nations.
And talking about the finances of it all, we hear the Vice President saying that he wants to see Nigeria's earnings from the fruit of the shea nut trees grow from $65 million to $300 million annually. What do you make of these projections? Are they realistic? Are they achievable? Where do they stand as we speak?
Okay, let me give you just some raw statistics. There are 200 million Nigerians. All right, let's say out of that 200 million Nigeria, 10% of them buys a locally made shea butter, right? And just 10%. 10% is 20 million. And they buy it, let's say, for $2. Just make a calculation for that. He already bust and already exceeded his projections. So that projections is, I think he under-projected considering all the factors that he does not have control over. And also considering the fact that it is locally made, easily it is cheaper. There is no foreign exchange involved. Somebody in the local market is making it, or a local industry, and is distributing them locally. And now we're not tapped into the foreign earnings now, because now you have to transform it from a not shea butter into a packaged product, either a cream, either an oil, whatever it is, and transform it. So locally alone, you can hit that target. Now let's contribute to...
So let me ask you this. As far as the trade balance is concerned, might this not affect Nigeria's trade balance, especially in the context of export revenues as well as currency inflows?
Yes. So I don't see it. I see it contributing to it, right? I will give you why I said it's contributing to the balance of trade, because now locally, we are now the one pushing out the product. It has been transformed, because what we've been facing in Africa in a very short while is that we're always giving the raw materials, I was looking at a case study where Nigeria gave out oil palms to Malaysia. Today, Malaysia turned those oil palms to more than 30, if not more, beauty products from just one oil palm. And right now, Malaysia already have varieties of this oil palm. They don't need Nigeria anymore. So that is a situation where you're giving your seeds out there, things that you're supposed to be national treasures that would increase your foreign earnings. You're giving them out. And this time, I believe Africa has woken up. This will be their foreign earnings being boosted up, especially in the case of Nigeria.
Dennis O'Shea, thank you so much for that update. Certainly we'll be looking at that story quite closely to see how the next 6 months actually pan out. Dennis O'Shea, thank you, sir.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Thami, for having me.
Thank you, Dennis. He's a certified financial modeling and valuation analyst. He's also a geopolitics content creator. He takes us to exactly 4:30 Central African time. Let's head over to the markets desk where Chanduko Ligeke is standing by with your latest indicators this Monday.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Are your indicators. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 63 in South Africa, and Botswana 13 Pula 32, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 63, Zambia 23 Kwacha 66 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 50, Ethiopia 141 big 43, Uganda 3,000 shilling 529, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 504. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 535. In Egypt, the dollar is 48 Egyptian pound 50. Tunisia, 2 dinar 89. Algeria, 128 dinar 82. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 90 ram 2 cents. In Angola, the dollar is at 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is at 2,845 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,476. Platinum at $1,409 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $68.29 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África @ newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
And standing by with the latest from the business of sport, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. So Liverpool have agreed a British transfer record fee of $145 million to sign Isak from Newcastle United. Now, sources close to the deal have told BBC Sport that an agreement for the Swedish international to move to Anfield is now officially in place. Newcastle sources claim the deal could be worth as much as $150 million with add-ons. Isak is undergoing medical today before signing a 6-year contract. Liverpool had an original $130 million fee, or rather offer rejected in August, but are now set to land their first choice target. The protracted saga involving the 25-year-old appears set to come to an end on the final day of the transfer window, which happens to be today. And also it follows Newcastle having signed striker Nick Walter-Maid from Stuttgart just last week. Will remain with the transfer window deadline. Tottenham Hotspur have agreed a season-long loan deal for Paris Saint-Germain striker Randal Kolo Muani. The 26-year-old has been linked with the Premier League clubs for several months, with interest from Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, Chelsea as well as West Ham. He is also said to move to Tottenham Hotspur on transfer deadline day. This after personal terms were agreed on with a Thomas Frank's side. Muani is said to be Tottenham Hotspur's fourth signing of the European summer, following Mohamed Kudus, João Palhinha as well as Xavi Simons. Back home now, South African swimming sensation Peter Coetzee has urged more corporate sponsors to come on board and back the sport following their outstanding achievement at the World Aquatics Championships in Singapore just last month. So Coetzee, together with Kaylene Corbett, received financial rewards from a headline sponsors, Bombela, a concessions company, for their medal-winning performances. The 21-year-old star clinched gold in the 100-meter backstroke event and then a silver medal in both the 200 meter as well as the 50 meter backstroke events, reaching all his finals in that competition in Singapore. He pocketed $1.7 thousand for the gold and then $1.1 thousand for both his silver medals. Coetzee hopes such gestures will indeed inspire more sponsors to invest in the growth of swimming in the country.
I think it's a great step forward. I think it's something swimming has been trying to do and has needed for a very long time, and to finally have that is awesome, and hopefully it translates into support for the younger athletes on their trips and funding for the travel, and hopefully it's a long-term relationship, because I think they said it's a 1-year relationship right now. Hopefully it can translate into something more long-term and keep supporting the sport and the athlete and growing it in South Africa.
On to this now, reigning African Coach of the Year Thabo Matibedi has revealed to SABC Sport that his athletes Bayanda Walaza, Sinosipo Dambile, as well as Gift Leotlela, have funded his trip to Italy to assist them ahead of the World Championships. So with the World Senior Championships scheduled from the 13th until the 21st of September in Tokyo, Japan, they want their coach nearby to guide their preparations. Many South African coaches often miss out on overseas training camps due to funding challenges, but Matibedi considers himself fortunate that his athletes are stepping to make it possible for him to travel with the players.
One of the things on this contract is that they are using their funds to pay for the coach to travel with them on a big championship. So they choose which big championship they need their coach, and then the money is from the athlete. So 3 of them, what they do is that they look at the manager will look at the amount of how much it costs, and then they will start paying for it, and they will pay for me from there on. Then the expenditure, the spending money, it's artist money. It's not. There's no formal sponsor. There's no one. None of these guys that give me money to fly with the athletes. Athletes are using their own money to fly me there.
Matibedi also explained the special bond he shares with his athletes, saying he always tries to ease their financial burden by skipping some overseas trips when necessary. He also admits that while they take care of his travel expenses, he also makes a conscious effort not to overstretch their budgets.
The marriage between the athlete and the coach is very important. There must be a huge trust between the two. So most of the trips I didn't go with them this year because I'm trying to save money for them as much as possible. I can't just fly with them anytime when I feel like flying because they will end up losing a lot of money on my flight and accommodation and food. So we prioritize on which one we really want to lead the coach there. Like things like championships. All the championships must be available.
All right, so that concludes the sports news this afternoon on Channel Africa. There'll be more sporting updates tomorrow morning on Africa Rise and Shine. As always, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:40 Central African time. Now, there is growing concern about South Africa being disconnected from the SWIFT global payment system following the country's tensions with the United States. Even though the likelihood of this happening is seen as a low risk, experts do warn that the economic consequences would be catastrophic if it were to happen. SWIFT is the backbone of international trade, allowing South African banks to move money across borders. Experts say losing access would choke off capital flows, trigger the rand collapse, and drive up the cost of living. Dimakatso Leshuru filed this report.
A United States proposed legislation known as the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025, introduced by Republican Ronnie Jackson, would require a comprehensive review of the U.S. and South Africa relationship. The bill, which is still in the legislative process, is not just symbolic. Not only does it criticize South Africa's foreign policy, its relationships with China, Russia, and Iran, and its stance on Hamas and the International Court of Justice case against Israel, as well as identify South African government and ANC officials who might be subject to sanctions. There's also growing concern that it might be used to cut off South Africa from the Global Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications SWIFT system. South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has reportedly expressed concern about this at a close meeting with the country's banks this past week. While some analysts say South Africa's strategic position in Africa makes exclusion from SWIFT unlikely, they believe Washington could still use the threat as leverage. Zolake Mnguni, a chief investment officer at Benguela Global Fund, explains.
The rand would depreciate severely. It would trigger sharp depreciation, and there'll be a lot of volatility. As you can imagine, there's a lot of transactions that happen offline. So it's not exchange of hard money. It's exchange of money through the banking system. So if you exclude South Africa from the SWIFT, it would mean that there'll be scarcity for the online currency. South Africa gets about 400 billion in annual flows from trade. So it would complicate that, and the rand would blow out, and then that would blow inflation out as well. And that would force interest rate hikes. So it would be a very bad scenario.
But if the worst were to happen, the fallout would be brutal. The banking sector would also be shaken to the core, he says.
I think the financial services industry would fall apart, to be quite honest. So the banking industry does a lot of cross-border transactions, and they rely on the liquidity that they get from the cross-border trades. So they have forex departments that trade currencies, and that goes through the SWIFT system. So that would actually create big problems for the banks. It would also mean that there'll be a lot of liquidity internally. That'd be a shortage of liquidity. So
Viv Govender, wealth specialist at Rand Swiss, says the US may be overplaying its hand. He says this would present an opportunity for alternatives.
The US may be overplaying its hand. Yes, they have built up a network globally that relies on the US as the key stone of their, or the foundation stone, or cornerstone of their global financial system. But this is not something that cannot be replaced with time. What would be required is enough of an incentive for the big players out there, the Europeans, the Chinese, and whoever else, the Indians, and so on, to basically decide that the inconvenience and the difficulty involved in basically creating a system that's an alternative to the US system would be viable, and for other participants in the marketplace to basically think that there is a need for this.
And for South Africa's already fragile credit rating, the outlook will darken further. Governor says while it is not justified for Donald Trump's government to act in this regard, it could do it.
This is a function of Donald Trump's, which was, I would say, mind or madness, or whatever you're going to phrase it as. He could easily push something like this through against South Africa. We are not a large enough player in the world for this to be a huge deal to the US. It's not justified in any means. It all comes down to whether he wants to do something like this or not, and he's willing to basically incur the mild amount of annoyance and difficulty of doing it. But if he wanted to, it could be done.
It's exactly 4:44 Central African time. A look there of what the implications would be should South Africa not have access to the SWIFT platform. But that, as we have heard from the experts, is most unlikely, but would have dire consequences should that be the case. We move on now to the digital banking report. It's a report by the African banker and Backbase titled Retail Banking Competing for the Modern African Customer. It forms part of the Africa Digital Banking Experience series, and what it does, it unpacks how banks across the continent are transforming retail banking by prioritizing operational agility, digital access, as well as customer engagement. The report also examines everyday banking in urban and rural areas and how the industry is leveraging technology to redefine financial access across the continents, ultimately reaching the unbanked population. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Nohailia Ibn El Farouk, account executive at EMEA at Backbase. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you in this interview in Channel Africa.
The pleasure is all ours. So let's take a look at this. There were a number of banks that were surveyed, and they emphasized operational efficiency to become more agile and cost effective, that's what's actually needed. How are they balancing digitization with the legacy system constraints?
Thank you so much, Thami, for the question. So maybe just to set a little bit of context on the report. We have, let's say, interviewed around 203 executives from 40 African countries, right? And their top priorities when it comes to digital, let's say, transformation, one of them is operational efficiency, right? And what...
Hi, my apologies. We don't have the best of lines, so I am going to ask our producer if she could just take you back, and then we'll try and get you on another line, just so we can have a more comfortable conversation. We apologize for that, but we certainly will continue our conversation in just a short while with Nohailia Ibn El Farouk. She's account executive mayor at Backbase, as we look at what the survey, the African banker and Backbase, a survey titled Retail Banking, and the outcomes thereof, as well as its impact on the banking sector on the continent.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Hawa wa Afrika Kusini wenye asili ya kizungu ambao wamepewa ukimbizi huko nchini Marekani. Je, nini chanzo cha wao kuomba ukimbizi nchini Marekani?
Wenyewe hawajaomba ukimbizi. Kuna shirika fulani inaitwa AfriForum, shirika mbili za wazungu ambao wanatetea haki ya wazungu hapa, AfriForum na Solidarity. Hao walienda Marekani kufanya kampeni kusema kwamba wazungu wananyanyaswa hapa Afrika Kusini, na walivyofanya hiyo kampeni serikali iweze kuwafuatilia kujua nini ambacho mnasema kwamba mnanyanyaswa.
Kuna namna ya wao kwamba wamepoteza uraia wa Afrika Kusini, na je, endapo Trump akamaliza muda wake madarakani, uhalali wao wa kuishi nchini Marekani ukoje?
Itakuwa vigumu, kifupi itakuwa vigumu wenyewe kupoteza uraia wao.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons à présent dérouler notre tapis rouge pour accueillir notre personnalité du jour, l'artiste chanteur Sheki Frey, qui est en ligne de Guinée avec nous.
Je suis un artiste guinéen, un créateur, un styliste, et je fais un peu ce qui plaît à mes fans. Voilà, c'est un peu ça. On a beaucoup de genres de trucs à faire, mais bon, pour le moment, on est basé un peu sur le rap.
D'accord. À quelle période de votre vie avez-vous commencé à vous intéresser à la musique, Sheki?
Bon, je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, parce que moi, je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa. We do have her back. She's Nohelia El Farouk, account executive EMEA at Backbase, talking about the retail banking survey report that was recently compiled. We do have you back, Nohelia, hopefully on a better line. And you were just starting to tell us about how the banks are going to be balancing digitization with the constraints that they have as legacy institutions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Thami. Apologies for the robotic voice. I think it was a technical issue. But I was mentioning a little bit of context on the report, or in the African Banking Report in partnership with Backbase. We have interviewed 203 executives, right, from 40 countries. And they shared with us the main priorities when it comes to their digital transformation. And what we see is that operational efficiency is one of the main objectives that we see. And that means automating all the flows that they currently have, just like onboarding, lending, and the back office tasks. But again, as you mentioned, there's always this constraint of legacy solutions, right? Legacy solutions are always something that can be burden the let's say the banks from innovation and can hinder that fast slowed process in these organizations. But what we have seen, at least in my experience with a lot of banks, is that you focus on the digital layer. And what that means, of course, if you're familiar with the banking sector, you always have a digital layer that the customer sees, and this is where we see a lot of impact and a lot of quick return on investment. But then you have all the back-end processes, which are usually the legacy systems. The focus, in order to have quick return on investments, is to mainly focus on the digital channels. A lot of executives also call that the front-end applications or the customer-facing applications, right? The legacy applications are usually the source of truth, right? And that means if you have a powerful platform, what we call an omni-channel platform, an engagement banking platform, it should be able to integrate with these existing legacy systems, right? And that can help you to be on a two-boat speed architecture that can help you embrace this innovation without having to worry about your existing legacy channels. Of course, they will always be there, but in the same time, you need to be able to take the maximum value from the customer-facing application where we see the most return on investment.
Let's talk and focus for a moment on the old versus the new, or even emerging. There is definitely a move towards digital banking, and it was found that the traditional banks must also contend with building new digital platforms or replacing their existing platforms, while digital first banks, they don't have such burdens. I mean, how are the banks dealing with the costs of this migration?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Currently, we see that I have worked on many projects where you have a lot of digital first banks, or what we call them also challenger banks, neobanks competing with traditional banks. But as I said in my first question, and I think that's the response to the second question, is that even if you have, let's say, a big bang, or at least a huge legacy system on the traditional side, you can also compete with these challenger banks or traditional first banks if you focus on the digital layer, because that's usually what makes the difference between a bank and another one. This is where we recommend using, let's say, an engagement banking platform that is let's say universal, and that can help you to plug into these existing systems, right? And that will allow you to compete with these digital first bank, I would say, or challenger banks. I hope I answered your question, though, Thami.
No, for sure. And one thing I also want to touch on before we end our conversation today is the need and the desire to expand services into rural and underserved populations by a number of banks. Why is this such an important move for them? And what role will digital banking technologies play in making it easier to reach these communities? And will they be talking the same language?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reason why we're focusing so much on, let's say, the rural areas or the underserved areas, because we currently have 43% of the global African population that's unbanked. So you imagine the amount of opportunity that we have in front of us, right? That's a very huge and massive market. And we need to focus on this financial inclusions and finding alternative way in order to serve these customers. Digital banking will for sure be a pillar in reaching these customers, I would say, and this underserved population, because, well, first, internet accessibility is growing, right? Other than the internet and the mobile applications, we also have USSD, which is part of the alternative ways of digital banking. You have wallet integration or wallet access. So the reason why we focus is that there is a huge untapped market where we need to empower these clients and these customers to be part of this financial inclusion program that a lot of countries are pushing for.
Naila, we'll have to leave it at that for this afternoon. Unfortunately, time not on our side. But thank you so much. A really fascinating report, really just future focused. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Have a
you,
nice day.
ma'am. Thank you, you too. That's Noela El Farouk. She's an account executive mayor at Backbase, taking us to exactly 4 minutes to 5 p.m.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K,
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:57 Central African Time as Africa in Business for this Monday afternoon. Bids you farewell and makes way for Vous d'Afrique. Vous d'Afrique avec Joël.
Avec moi, merci. Bonjour Thami.
Merci,
bonjour à tous les
bonjour.
auditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors sur Vue d'Afrique, on parlera de la présidentielle 2026 au Bénin et du candidat désigné de la majorité, mais aussi de la Côte d'Ivoire. 60 candidatures retenues sur la liste provisoire. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And that's it from the Africa in Business team for this Monday. Thank you to our entire production team and on-air team. I'm Thami Ngubeni, and until we meet again, you have yourself a splendid evening further. It's gone exactly 2 minutes to 5 p.m. The French desk taking over now.